So I come back from Konstantinivka. I'm out there embedded with evacuation teams that were evacuating the elderly and the disabled. We filmed that process. Some of these elderly people were, having strokes during the evacuation process. It's very grueling for them to, be put under this type of pressure where they're moving, being moved quite a lot under possible bombardment. And on the day we went into Konstantinivka, we were getting warned by checkpoint guards of aid workers getting killed in the areas that we were going to. And when we were moving, like 4 minutes after we leave a location, that area would get hit by a glide bomb, or an area would get hit by a grad rocket strike, or whatever it is. You'd see a lot. We don't really go back to check 9 times out of 10. Like, oh, there's an explosion over there. Let me get out my seeing eyeglass and let me get real close. Yeah, no, we tend to move away when that type of thing happens. But we're, busy over there. We also filmed some body recovery. Didn't smell great, but we filmed some body recovery because of the, body diplomacy that's been going on the border. A lot of it PR oriented, but we can talk about that in a different segment. Point was, I was distracted with corpses, civilian evacuation, and water delivery right on the front line within like 2 to 3 kilometers of Russian positions, right? So what was happening diplomatically between the Iranians and the Israelis was really nothing more than morning conversation between me, my fixer Bogdan, and my cameraman, my camera donkey, as we've come to call him, lovingly, of course, Devin San Luis. But outside of that, we were more distracted with, the bombings that would happen during the nights. There's actually a lot of Shaheed attacks in Kramatorsk where we were residing at the time. And so I was a little distracted. But as I finally got back to Kiev and we drove back and, I sat down and laid down on my bed and I tried to stretch out my muscles and, try to relax a little bit. I look at social media and this is what I stumble upon. Iranian state TV. This is what was really like slapping me awake to, this is going down.
که شنیدید صدای متجاوز به خاک وطن، صدای متجاوز به صدای حق و حقیقت است. آنچه که ملاحظه کردید، صدایی که شنیدید، فضای غبارآلوده استودیو
I gotta say, honestly, as somebody who's seen quite a few bombings, she kept her cool very well. She kept her cool very well. Very well, honestly. But besides that, that is what was slapping me awake to the fact that stuff was going down. And the Israeli bombings on Iran, I gotta say, really took me by surprise. They took me by surprise, not because I thought that was like beneath Bibi, beneath Netanyahu, or that the Israelis, I thought the Israelis would make a strategic calculus that this wasn't a good idea. It really more surprised me just due to how devastating it was. And I want to be very clear here because I've seen a lot of, let's just say, chest pounding on social media. Stuff like this, like last time when U.S. soldiers met Iran, right? Now, what they didn't tell you is that we shellacked the Iranian Navy so hard here that the Soviets actually put a cruiser in the area just to monitor it, just to watch, right? So, a lot of the actual history of these confrontations aren't really shown. But there is this idea that, I don't know how to put it, that Israel's throwing a few rockets at, Iran. Iran's throwing a few rockets at Israel. And, now the great confrontation between, the great Satan and, the other great Satan, whatever your perspective is, it's come and it's tough and it's hard for both sides. And, there are civilian casualties, which are, of course, tough for both sides. People having rubble collapse on them in bomb shelters, children killed, horrible stuff. But to be completely honest with you, the thing that shocked me most was just how unbelievably weak Iranian air defenses ended up performing here. Air defenses were not only smashed, but I saw that the F4, oh God, the Tomcats. It's hard to watch them burn. Oh, sweet summer child. But their Air Force was getting shellacked. Their air defense systems were getting shellacked. And I think probably most devastating for the Iranian government, a lot of their high command, IRGC high-ranking commanders, a lot of these commanders gathering in groups and then getting bombed by the Israelis, either in like high-rise buildings or wherever they find them. I mean, it was really devastating. The Russian provided S-300s, S-400s, whatever. They did not end up being sufficient to stop the Israeli strikes, which did a lot of damage to Iranian military command, which did a lot of damage to the Iranian Air Force, and it did a lot of damage to Iranian air defense, as well as, of course, wounding and killing a certain number of civilians. Tragic, of course. So Iran responded. They fired some missiles back. They fired some drones back. But the majority of that was intercepted. And I have seen what seems to be pretty clear photographic and video evidence of Israeli drones in the area. And I'm not just talking about, hey, here's a long-range drone, even though I've seen those too. I mean drones that could have been in hiding, that were prepared inside Iran by actors in Iran, that were then launched like FPV style, the way that Operation Spiderweb worked. And I remember I talked about this at the time, because a lot of people, well, maybe not a lot of people, but a certain collection of individuals were of the thought like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that the Ukrainians would do this and set the standard in international war. Do they not realize how much damage this could do to American military installations in Baghdad or American military installations in New Jersey? All you need is to place 20 drones in the back of a van. You open the back door and boom. But I see it as these puzzle pieces already existed. It's just the Ukrainians were the first ones to put them together, and they put them together to target what? Strategic bombers that are being used against major metropolitan areas. And now we can see that it wasn't just the Ukrainians that had these puzzle pieces. It seems that the Israelis had these puzzle pieces as well, and it's inevitable that other nation states and non-state actors, which I think is where a lot of the concern comes from, is going to get this as well. Point is, Iran gets hit very, very hard. They then fire back drones, fire back missiles at Israel. While the majority of those were intercepted, a lot of them did end up getting through. A lot of them did do damage. Civilians died. Some military targets got hit. And it did some damage to the Israelis. And then the Israelis responded in kind with more missile strikes, more attacks. And it's been like that for the last 5 days. A back and forth barrage where sometimes the launchers are getting targeted on the ground and maybe more missiles could have launched, but nevertheless, missiles are getting through. Drones are being fired to try to saturate Israeli air defense, and then the ballistic missiles are fired to try to penetrate Israeli air defense. So this is the situation, and I just want to throw out there quickly, and I'm sorry to take the moment for any amount of shade, but this shows, once again, that traditional aircraft still have a place on the battlefield, okay? Don't listen to these discount alt media commentators who have never seen a battlefield, who have never really studied the Air Force or studied air warfare, have no clue what they're talking about, either when it comes to drone technology or F-35s or F-16s, F-15s, or whatever. Don't listen to these people saying planes are the past, drones are the future. To be completely blunt with you, planes still have a place on the battlefield, and we're seeing that right now with the bombardment, okay? So, sorry, Elon, okay? There's still a role for the F-35. Also, big warning, there is so much disinformation. And it's not misinformation, it's disinformation, because I see a lot of AI creations of, oh my God, look at this Israeli downed F-35, and the back fin is on the wrong way, or the thing is like 100 times bigger. And I do mean like 100 times bigger than it should be. It's like the Nephilim is being used to pilot the F-35. It's a biblical people of, I don't need to giants, very big people. Point is, you got to be very careful, because disinformation actors, state actors are working right now to try to convince you that their amount of devastating force is more devastating than it actually is through AI images. And your grandparents are not ready. Your grandma, your grandfather, probably your parents too, they're not ready for the waves of AI slop, disinformation, and misinformation that is going to swarm through not only X, but Facebook, Instagram, and every single social media platform you can think of. Okay, if MySpace was still kicking, MySpace, I think it's technically still around, but you know. Point is, you got to keep an eye out, and you got to be vigilant, because it is bad. It is bad. Also, another way that I found out about this, just one last side piece, is through this shell writing from the Russians. He uses the slur for Ukrainians, will pay for Iran. For those of you who might have missed it, definitely with the recent bombardment against Iran with basically no response by the Russians and the Iranians actually signed a strategic partnership, which said that if one nation was attacked, the other nation would come to their aid. Now, I haven't seen much, if anything, outside of diplomatic statements that the Russians have provided to the Iranians since the bombardment has started, outside of the air defense systems which were blown up by the Israelis. So I don't really know where that strategic partnership is going. There could be some stuff that's happening, you know, in the back rooms that we don't know about, you know, in some closed door diplomatic meetings, things that are being approved. But as of right now, I think the Russians are probably pretty distracted, and they have their own issues to deal with. And the idea that they're going to take a bunch of air defense systems and send them over to the Iranians at this point, when the Russians don't even have enough air defense systems to cover their country, which is the largest country on the planet, in most situations, very beneficial. When you need to set up air defense systems, not as beneficial. Not as beneficial. You have a lot of ground to cover. And so what can they provide to the Iranians? Well, they provided a diplomatic statement where they said, what was it? It's something along the lines of, this is against the principles of the UN Charter when it comes to the crime of aggression. This was an unprovoked assault against the facts. I'm sorry, dude. The Russians appealing to the UN Charter, the crime of aggression, unprovoked attack. Come on, man. It's comical. It's comic. I can't read the statement and take it seriously. I didn't take it seriously when it was released. Nobody took it seriously when it was released. So if that's all the Russians end up providing is that diplomatic statement, they basically just did a stand-up act on behalf of the Iranians. My goodness. So it doesn't seem like the Russians are going to be coming to the Iranians' rescue. They're not really in much of a position to come to the Iranians' rescue. They kind of have their hands full. And so instead you get stuff like this. You know, the Ukrainians will pay for Iran. As if the Ukrainians had anything to do with this. So, this isn't just stopping when it comes to a conflict between Israel and Iran, though. The United States looks very likely to get involved. And in fact, I would not be surprised if there was some sort of strike done by the American Air Force within the next 24 hours. I'm not going to put down a hard, it has to happen within 24 hours, it has to happen within this deadline, because I am not in the Situation Room. But I do know that Donald Trump canceled meetings he was supposed to have at the G7, which he said some pretty embarrassing things there that we're going to get to later, but he canceled what was already becoming a PR embarrassment for the United States to come over back to the United States, get in the Situation Room. And while Emmanuel Macron said, like, hey, you know, this is for diplomacy, you know, he left for diplomatic stuff. He was like basically covering for Trump as to why he skipped the G7 meeting. before he even talked to Zelensky, as Ukraine's getting bombarded every day. And then Trump responded, publicity-seeking Emmanuel Macron of France mistakenly said that I left the G7 summit in Canada to go back to DC to work on a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Wrong. He has no idea why I am on my way to Washington, but it certainly has nothing to do with a ceasefire. I don't know why I capitalized cease and fire there. Much bigger than that. Whether purposely or not, Emmanuel Macron always gets it wrong. Corrupt, Stay tuned.
Burns
so,
is an immoral, morally
it becomes
corrupt,
pretty clear that Donald Trump is heading back probably to the United States for one reason: getting in the Situation Room and preparing more action against Iran. Where Donald Trump had kind of signaled that this was, hey, this is Israel's business, this isn't our business, as he started to move more military assets into the region, and military assets in the region were being prepared for action. Hey, Leon, thanks for the 100 bits. It became clear that the president was putting more options on the table. And then you started to hear a tune that might sound familiar to anyone alive for the last 25, 30 years. Iran is racing towards a nuclear weapon. Look out. Iran is going to get an atomic bomb, and it's right around the corner. And in fact, the time window for this atomic bomb is shrinking. It is closing. And so Israel was putting out signals that there is no negotiation. Its defense minister was just saying, we don't see a opportunity for negotiations, as Trump right now is still floating that, hey, maybe something can be negotiated. In fact, when he was talking about that True Social post saying, hey, we're working on something much bigger than that, Trump then told reporters later, when he was on the Air Force One going back to the United States, actually that something greater is something permanent, like a permanent settlement, some permanent solution to the violence in the Middle East, Hey, thank you so much for the 5 buccarinos. You think they're going to go full B-52? Well, I don't know yet. We haven't even finished the explanation as to where we're at. So until I get to the end here, I can't tell you what the conclusion is, but I'll get to that. Thank you very much for the $5. And so Donald Trump gets back to the United States, and he starts signaling pretty openly that military action due to Iran racing towards its atomic weapon is on the table. Let me read you some of the things that was being said by Donald Trump. Okay, let me just read you some of these. We now have complete and total control over Iran, over the skies over Iran. Iran had good sky trackers and other defensive equipment, and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better than the good old US of A. We know exactly where the so-called supreme leader, he's talking about the Ayatollah, is hiding. He is an easy target. He's openly talking about killing the leader of Iran through strikes, but is safe there. We are not going to take him out. Parentheses, kill, exclamation point, in case any of you were confused as to what he meant. At least not for now. But we don't want missiles shot at civilians or American soldiers, because if we do end up bombing Iran's atomic program with our B-2s, what is that going to mean? That's going to mean our bases in the Middle East are going to get hit. That's going to mean our soldiers in the Middle East are going to be put in harm's way, and that could mean American fatalities. Our patience is wearing thin. Thank you for your attention to this matter. As if you're speaking over the intercom at a mall or something. Unconditional surrender. I have to throw out there that this seems like one of the least likely outcomes at this point, but seems to be what Donald Trump is saying is the diplomatic standard he is holding the Iranians to, that they need to surrender unconditionally, and then maybe this type of violence, this escalation, take that off-ramp we offered earlier in talks, and then maybe we'll accept it. But I don't even know if that off-ramp from earlier is still on the table. It could be after the Israeli strikes and, the the kicking in of Iranian air defense systems that the presidents thought, well, you know, the Iranians have a weaker hand now. I'm actually going to demand more, but we don't know that. We do not know that. So this is a live cam of Israel. There's also some live cams of areas in Tehran. There's not as many of live cams in Tehran. I think that the Iranian authorities have kind of worked hard to try to cover some amount of, strategic ambiguity on the ground, not wanting to give like a live feed of all these areas, but there's still some. So all of this has centered from Donald Trump, the same guy who said, no new wars. He's going to be the peace president. He's going to be the peace president. Not that he was particularly the peace president the first time around. I mean, people say that, but they also forget that Donald Trump expanded the amount of drone strikes compared to Barack Obama, and definitely compared to Joe Biden, who had very low amounts of drone strikes in comparison to relative to Barack Obama and Donald Trump. But he had record numbers of drone strikes, and then he limited the amount of drone strike information the public could get. Basically made it less transparent than it was before, so that the press and the American public have less access to information. But Donald Trump was, he was the peace guy. He was the peace candidate. And so you've gotten a lot of people who were all out there before, and I'm only going to show one message like this because there's a lot of messages like this. You can go look at, at The Persistence, or at this guy, Captive Dreamer, or any number of Trump supporters. Let me read you this one. Trump winning means no war. War is simply not in the cards. Anyone talking about war with Iran is just out to lunch. And there's so many examples of this that they all don't really bear mentioning. All you need to do is go look out your popular MAGA accounts, Google Iran or Google war, Google Trump peace or something along those lines, and you'll get it. Or you can go look at the old Trump campaign material when he was going out there and saying, look, I'm the candidate of peace. I'm the candidate of peace. Or you can look at Donald Trump for in 2011. In order to get elected, Barack Obama will start a war with Iran. Barack Obama will attack Iran in order to get reelected. I predict that President Obama will at some point attack Iran in order to save face. Remember that I predicted a long time ago that President Obama will attack Iran because of his inability to negotiate properly. Not skilled. Not skilled. And there has been some breaking at the seams of the MAGA movement over this, over some people who are like, look, this is not what I voted for. He said he was the peace candidate. Now I see Lindsey Graham doing a breakdance on CNN. John Bolton has been impossible to contact, probably because he has just been, drooling watching his television screen over the last few weeks. Either way, people like Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, these other old MAGA-ers from the start are a little hesitant. And Donald Trump has actually responded to some of those critiques in this way. America first means many great things, including the fact that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Make America great again. Somebody please explain to Kooky. Now that's when you know a relationship has fallen apart. When he starts giving you the nickname. Somebody please explain to Kooky Tucker Carlson that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They cannot. He refuses. No. So I'm going to get back to this in a sec, and I want to talk to you guys about if Iran actually is pursuing a nuclear weapon, if it's around the corner, if it's a year away, if it's 3 months away, if it's 3 years away, because it seems that Trump's head intelligence official, Tulsi Gabbard, disagreed with Donald Trump's assessment as she was going through the Senate committee process of seeing if she was going to get confirmed. And, Trump fought for her, Trump pushed her, and she said before the committee that Iran was not actively pursuing an atomic weapon, and that they were years away from attaining one. And we have 4 sources telling CNN, 4 intelligence sources, 4 separate intelligence sources, that they're still roughly 3 years away from attaining an atomic weapon. So is Trump right? Or is Tulsi Gabbard right? Well, he did respond to Tulsi, but we'll get back to that in a moment. Israel says that Iran is right around the corner from an atomic weapon, that they could be potentially months away from acquiring one. Now, this position directly contradicts what Tulsi Gabbard said, Trump's top intelligence official, when she was getting confirmed during her confirmation hearing. During the confirmation hearing, Tulsi Gabbard said that Iran was nowhere close to attaining an atomic weapon, and that they were, quite a distance away from that. Now, let me be clear, that doesn't mean that's the position of the Trump administration. Just because Tulsi Gabbard said something doesn't mean that that's their end-all, be-all, forever position. In fact, if you actually see what Donald Trump said about what Tulsi Gabbard said, here you go, from Caitlin Collins, asked where he personally stands on how close Iran was to getting a nuclear deal, given his DNI. Tulsi Gabbard testified in March, which was 3 months ago, that the intel community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon. Trump said, very close. Asked about Gabbard's testimony, Trump said, I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having it. Now, I gotta say, putting aside the question of disregarding intelligence assessments for a moment, the only positive of having Tulsi Gabbard as the top intelligence official in this country, in the long, long list of negatives, the only positive is that every once in a while, we're going to see Trump throw her under the bus. And every time, watching her bounce under the political tires is going to be unbelievably entertaining. Just like this was. Unbelievably entertaining. And when he said, I don't care what she said, he said it nonchalantly, so nonchalant. Like the idea of him having to balance his current statements about Iran is so close, they're so close, we're preventing it. Balance that with her statement. Like you would see most politicians, they would like maneuver and be like, well, maybe 3 months ago that was the case, but in the 3 months since then, Iran has XYZ, which is what the Israelis have suggested a little bit. But instead of Trump even attempting that, he's like, I don't care what she said. I said they're close to a bomb. I said they're close to a bomb, buddy. So who's right? Is Tulsi Gabbard right? Trump's top intelligence official? Is Donald Trump right? And the Israelis right that they were close to a bomb? Well, we have a report from CNN that I find fascinating because they talked to 4 separate U.S. intelligence officials, and they say that Iran is years, specifically 3 years, away from attaining an atomic device. When Israel launched its series of strikes against Iran last week, it also issued a number of dire warnings about the country's nuclear program, suggesting Iran was fast approaching a point of no return in its quest to obtain nuclear weapons, and that the strikes were necessary to preempt that outcome. But U.S. intelligence assessments had reached a different conclusion. Not only was Iran not actively pursuing a nuclear weapon, it was also up to 3 years away from being able to produce and deliver one to a target of its choosing, according to 4 people familiar with the intelligence assessment. So this is an intelligence assessment that 4 different intelligence sources have reported the same thing back to CNN. Another senior U.S. official told CNN that Iran is about as close as you can get before building a nuclear weapon. If Iran wanted one, they have all the things they need. So this is a senior U.S. official, not a senior, this is from this intelligence assessment. These are senior U.S. officials saying they're as close as they can get before they actually start building one. Now, days after Israeli strikes, U.S. intelligence officials believe that so far, Israel may have set back Iran's nuclear program by only a matter of months, according to one of those people, a U.S. official. Even as Israel has done significant damage to Iran's facility at Natanz, which houses centrifuges necessary to enrich uranium, a second heavily fortified enrichment site at Fordo has remained effectively untouched. Israel lacks the capability to damage this without specific U.S. weapons and aerial support. Israel can hover over those facilities and render them inoperable, but if you really want to dismantle them, it's either a U.S. military strike or a deal, said Brett McGurk, who's been very involved in the Middle East that has led us to the situation we are in. A former top diplomat to the Middle East under the Trump and Biden administration, and now a CNN analyst, because you bring on people like that after the failures. Whatever. This raises a key dilemma for the Trump administration, which is struggling to avoid becoming entangled in a costly, complex war in the Middle East. So, Tulsi Gabbard says they're not close to an atomic weapon. A U.S. intelligence assessment says they're 3 years away from getting an atomic weapon and then delivering an atomic weapon. The Israelis say, well, Trump says that they're close, and so they either need to take his off-ramp, unconditional surrender, as he says on Truth Social, almost on Twitter, Truth Social, and the Israelis say that they're months away. But to be completely honest with you, the Israelis have been saying that they're months away from a bomb since the 90s. And when I say the 90s, I do mean the 90s. The Daily Show actually put together a little compilation, since they're not very, I believe they don't do Trevor Noah anymore. This is the Daily Show with Jon Stewart, right? Yeah, no, I didn't find Trevor Noah all that funny. But now that John's back, he's okay, 1 out of every 5 times. Let's listen.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months.
They have the wherewithal, the stored up, preserved knowledge to make a bomb very quickly if they wanted to do it.
Iran is so dangerous. Weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
They're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb.
Iran is gearing up to produce 25 bombs, atomic bombs a year, 250 bombs in a decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, time is running out.
Iran will be capable of producing alone, without importing anything, nuclear bombs within 3 to 5 years.
So you can go all the way back to 95. And you get this type of commentary from Benjamin Netanyahu about how close they are to an atomic bomb. 3 to 5 years, 6 months. It depends on, which date it is and what time it is. How many bombs, whether it's going to be a couple of bombs or 250 bombs or whatever it is. Again, it depends on the setting, depends on the day, what you're going to hear from Benjamin Netanyahu. Point is, Israel's been saying this for quite a bit. But that's not to say, because I saw from Mehdi Hassan and other people, that Iran is not trying to get an atomic weapon. Iran, at the very least, wants to be in a position where they can attain an atomic weapon, where they can pursue it if cornered, if they believe that there's no other opportunity, no other chance, and they can. That's not to say that they don't want a bomb. They do. It's just that immediately when the United States finds out that Iran is XYZ months away from getting a bomb, and they're actually pursuing it, there will be immediately B-2 bombers sent over Iran, and they will be dropped on those facilities immediately. It could be Donald Trump's administration. It could be Obama's administration or Biden's administration. If that is the scenario that's playing out, that is almost certainly what they're going to do. They're going to hit those with B-2 bombers. And right now, that is what the Israelis want the Trump administration to do. And we have resources in the region to do it. Our B-2 bombers are in place. Our other aircraft are in place. Our refueling aircraft are in place. And Israeli air defenses, as we've talked about earlier, are in the worst state that they have been in years. The S-300s and the S-400s provided by the Russians were insufficient in stopping the Israeli bombardment, which disabled not only much of its air defense systems, but also much of its launchers of, missiles and drones. The Tomcats, I'm sorry, it still hurts. The Tomcats, they took those out. And they have done damage to its leadership by assassinating its leaders through strikes. And so what the Israelis have shown is that Iranian air defense systems have been insufficient in being able to stop air attacks from Israel. And so if the United States, which does have quite a lot of air power at its disposal, we are the predominant air power on the planet, if we were to go in there, it is probably true that we could drop those bunker-busting bombs on those atomic facilities and disable them. Whether or not this would put Iran a few more years away from an atomic bomb, 5 years, 10 years. I cannot tell you. The highest estimate I saw was something like 10 years. But of course, like, you know, the highest estimate doesn't end up usually being the estimate. But the point is that if we were to do this, we would probably find some success. That's not to say that we couldn't lose any aircraft. That's not to say that we couldn't lose any airmen, but we would probably find success. Now, that success would not come without any cost, though, because as the Iranians have launched more missiles and more drones at Israel, something that has been on the minds of many American military commanders and soldiers in the Middle East is the threat to our bases. And the Iranians have made clear that if the United States assists Israel in the conducting of its war against Iran, that they will strike our bases. Some were fearful that with us helping to intercept Israeli missiles and Iranian missiles and drones that were fired at Israel, us doing that might even be enough to inspire it. I doubted that, and that doesn't seem to be the case because Iran is in quite a difficult position. Its launch sites and its missile storages are being targeted by the Israelis. We do not know how much more stockpile they have left to continue this tat for tat, blow for blow, back and forth strikes with the Israeli government. And if they continue this out for 10, 20 days, 30 days, how many missiles and drones are they going to have left to launch against American bases if the United States chooses at that point to intervene, to go in, strike these, atomic facilities, or to strike Iranian missile launch sites, or Iranian drone launch sites, or Iranian anything? And so that is the difficult position that the Iranians find themselves in. I have to say that the Iranians are in an extremely weakened position, despite what you might see on social media. Their air defenses are in a very bad state. They're not air defensing as they should be. Their proxies in the region have either been overthrown, as we saw in Syria, or they have been heavily weakened and are currently angry at Iran, as we talk about Hezbollah. The only one that isn't are the Houthis, and the Houthis are too far away from Israel to do anything besides launching a few missile barrages. And at that distance, almost all of them are going to get intercepted, as Israel will likely have fair warning in advance. I mean, the Houthis can attack more civilian ships, but I mean, it's not like they weren't doing that anyway. And so the Iranians are in a tough position. They can't really call upon anyone else to support them. I mean, they did sign that strategic partnership with the Russians, but do you think the Russians are in a position to ship all their air defense systems to the Iranians right now? I mean, why do you think the Russians barely had anything to dole out in support of the Assad regime besides some airstrikes, which paled in comparison to the strikes that they doled out for the Syrian regime back during 2015, 2016, 2014, back in that time period? Point is, Iran don't got many friends that come to their disposal. Their air defense systems have had their teeth kicked in, and we do not know how deep their missile stockpiles go, which puts them in a weakened position that makes people like John Bolton and Bibi Netanyahu very excited. And Netanyahu wants to take this moment. It's why the Israeli defense minister has openly said, like, we're not in a we're not in a position to negotiate. We are not negotiating. This is not a negotiation. We will do something. And it is the United States which has still floated to some degree the possibility of an off-ramp if the Iranians take that off-ramp. Despite any amount of, anger you might see amongst the base of some of the MAGA movement about American interventionism in the Middle East turning its head again, despite all the pro-peace candidate talking points, despite Trump saying back in 2011 that Obama is going to strike Iran because he just wants to get reelected, and this shows how much of a bad negotiator he is. You can bring up all those old quotes, you can bring up all the peace sentiment from the campaign trail you want. Trump expanded drone strikes in the first term and restricted access to information on it. You think this is the guy that's going to turn around now for the peace doves? No. What he sees is Iran in a weakened position. So Iran either has to take this deal while he's saying unconditional surrender in public, or they're going to face fire and fury, as Trump would put it, slaughter, as he put it in an earlier post on his Truth social media platform when he put out his truth. Still very Orwellian, isn't it? The president has put out a truth. Let us all go read a truth declared by the president, because it is declared by him. It is a truth. Either way, because Iran is in this weakened position, regardless if Iran is 3 years away, as that one intelligence report says, or 3 months away, there is an incentive for the Trump government, and especially for the Israelis, to convince the American government to act and deploy its B-2 bombers, because it is only our B-2 bombers that can take out those atomic facilities. The Israelis can blow up some generals. The Israelis can blow up some air defense systems. But at the end of the day, they need American B-2 bombers and bunker-busting bombs if they are going to disable the Iranian nuclear program for a sufficient period of time outside of a few extra months. And so the Israelis desperately want to see the American government intervene and do this bombing. And thank you for the $5. I appreciate that. Thank you for the Canadian $5. And Calvin Simpson, thank you so much for the 2. I appreciate that. BB 1995, Benjamin Netanyahu or Benjamin Button. He always looks the same age, doesn't he? Well, no, he looks a little older here, but it's very minimal, actually. He's aged surprisingly well from there. Or you could just say he's always looked like an old man, and it's less that he's aged well and he never was aged particularly well. So, from the Iranian point of view, what do you do if you're the Iranians? Do you race to a nuke now and hope the Americans don't discover in time and see if you can try to get it through? But if you get discovered, then you're going to get bombed, and that's for sure. Do you compromise and back off of an atomic weapon and say, never mind, we won't have an atomic weapon. We'll have a minimal amount of civilian atomic capacity to produce energy, but we are going to allow inspectors, constant inspections. We're going to X, Y, and Z. If you do that, will the Iranian public see that as weakness from the government that they'll respond to with anger, saying, where have all of our tax dollars been going? We want to fix the roads. We want better public education. We want better health care. You funnel it all into this atomic program, then to defend us against the great Satan, and then you just shut it off after they blow up our apartment buildings and our air defense systems, and that's gonna, how is that gonna be received by the Iranian public? Will that be a sign of weakness for the regime? It undoubtedly is a sign of weakness for the regime. Will that be translated to a public uprising? I don't know. And honestly, right now, I think it's very unlikely. Just because the Shah of Iran keeps going on Twitter talking about revolution, and people talk about revolution, does not mean it's particularly likely. Iranian police still dominate the ground. Any protests have been met with batons, and I think the likelihood of that happening immediately, especially under these conditions, when the Iranian government can easily characterize those who are protesting as actors that are weakening the Iranian state in the face of Israeli aggression. It's not like those who want to see the Iranian government change in Iran like Israel, or particularly love the United States. So the Iranians are in a tough position. Do you take this off-ramp and make your regime look weak and back off of this atomic plan and allow the Israelis to have an unregulated, unmonitored atomic arsenal as the only one in the Middle East, as your proxies are getting their teeth kicked in? Or do you barrel on forward, continue to refuse, and face the American government possibly coming through and ending, or at least sending back that program a long ways anyway through the use of their B-2 bombers, as the United States and Israel, because of their weakened air defense systems, work together to do a combined bombing campaign? And let's say you're preparing for that outcome. Let's say Iran says, you know what? We've put so much investment into this program over time. We don't accept that Israel is the only power in the region that will get atomic weapons. We must not compromise on this, and we cannot acquiesce. We cannot acquiesce. Where do they concentrate their fire? This is a real question. Where do the Iranians concentrate their fire? Do they continue to do this tat for tat blow with the Israelis? Every time the Israelis bomb Iran, Iran responds with missiles and drones to saturate the air defense systems, and then missiles to penetrate. I mean, most of them are getting intercepted by Israel's two-tiered air defense system. But do they continue to do that anyway? Hoping that they hit a building and punish them, either to, keep the Iranian public viewing them as somebody who was properly resisting Israel, properly standing up and defending the nation, or to try to knock the Israelis, try to, knock some sense into them from their perspective, disable some of their military assets if you can. Or do you save those resources and then you expend them on American bases for the possibility of America coming in and disabling the atomic program? Because if America blows up their atomic facilities, their nuclear facilities, their research facilities, if they go in and drop the bunker busters, Iran has to have some response. They can't just sit back and say, well, America, you won, fair game, GG, and shake hands. No, they have to have some response, or the regime looks unbelievably weak, completely pathetically weak. And then there's going to be a real question of, well, damn, I mean, maybe regime changes. And that's not to say we'll see American boots on the ground due to Iran's geography. I think they always will discourage that. Ask the Iraqis how that went. But there is a question of, where do they preserve their stockpiles for? Do they preserve their stockpile for potential confrontation with the United States and therefore don't fire back with too much force at the Israelis? Or do they fire back with force at the Israelis, trying to dissuade further action by showing their strength and inspiring, some image of resistance for the Iranian public, where the other image would look quite weak, especially in the face of their air defenses getting their teeth kicked in and Israeli drones flying over, Iranian cities. Iran is in an extremely difficult position right here, and there's not much maneuverability for them. And so that call is going to be a difficult one, but it's one they might have to make if they don't take Trump's off-ramp. And this is the other thing. Trump supposedly negotiated with the Iranians and gave them an off-ramp. Now, we know that there were talks, but I say supposedly negotiate because I don't know if it was a negotiation based in I want to find a settlement, or a negotiation based in I want to create a specter for the Israelis to do this damage. And then after they do the damage, then we'll revisit negotiations. Seriously or non-seriously, I don't know. Either way, though, I don't know, now that the Israelis have done so much damage to their air defense systems, now that they've done so much damage to their launch silos and to their air force and disabled so many IRGC commanders, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders, that now is the time that they're like, okay, remember that earlier off-ramp? Let's do that. What if the off-ramp is different now? I am old enough to remember when Donald Trump was critiquing the Iran deal, not because it's going to allow an atomic weapon, even though that was, toiled out as well, but because it didn't deal with Iranian destabilization, meaning it didn't deal with the problem of the Iranians continuing to ship weapons to Hezbollah, continuing to ship weapons to the Houthis, continuing to reinforce the Assad regime, and continuing to send resources to the PMF and other proxy militias in Iraq. And so I don't know if that off-ramp, if it was just, hey, it'll only be a civilian atomic program, is even still, hey, it should be a civilian atomic program. I mean, if Trump is saying things like unconditional surrender on Truth Social, and that's the signal he's setting, is that just chest pounding to show the image of strength, or is that his believed position, where he's like, look, maybe before all these strikes by the Israelis, we would have accepted you backing off your atomic weapons program, but now you need to promise never to send weapons to Hezbollah anymore. Now you need to promise not to send any more weapons to the Houthis and make the Houthis stop attacking international shipping without a settlement to the Israel-Palestine war, which of course will be of much anger for the Houthis, who will then have to make the decision on whether they want to continue to get some Iranian support or be dragged back. Because if the Iranians said, we can't send you any more aid, also no more bombing near Israel, I think then there's no more leverage for them to make them, you know, because Iran has just signaled that it's not going to be there to support them anymore. So why would the Houthis listen? And point is, the demands might no longer even be just stop your atomic weapons program. It could be completely reshape your objectives for Middle East dominance. Completely reshape your objectives as somebody trying to counter the Israelis through the building of this spider web of alliances and militias and other armed forces in the region, both state and non-state actors. This all leaves me in the position of seeing quite clearly that both Israel, which have said clearly that there's no chance for negotiation, and the Trump administration have a lot of incentives to do this bombing, have a lot of incentives to take out the atomic arsenal while their air defenses are weakened, while Iran is in a weakened position, while Hezbollah is in a weakened position to launch more rockets and attacks into Israel, and while the Assad regime can no longer be used as an avenue to funnel more weapons this way, as they're normalizing with al-Shura in Syria. I think there's a lot of incentives for the American government to bomb Iran. I think there's a lot of incentives for the Israelis to bomb Iran. And definitely when we talk about how their government thinks and how our government thinks right now. If this was Harris, maybe the situation would be a little different. Maybe Harris would reel this in a little different. I have no clue. But under this administration, with how they've been talking, with Ambassador Huckabee leading the way, I think odds are American steel might be penetrating Iranian atomic facilities, putting American personnel in the Middle East at risk. And the question is more to me, if that's a likely scenario, how much resources will Iran then expend against American bases to try to kill American sailors, airmen, and infantry? That's something that has to be asked, because if at this end state, Iran is down an atomic weapons program and we're down hundreds of soldiers in the Middle East, I don't know how the American public will react to that when Trump was supposedly the peace candidate. Brunkle Jimothy, thank you so much for the redeemed ask for subs. Thank you, thank you. If anybody wants to support the channel and make it so I can do more freelance on-the-ground war journalism,